The intention now in this second part is to tell user community stories. And I will start this session with a kind of overview of these user stories by talking about these iMarine solutions in support to the ecosystem approach needs. And this will be followed by more, let's say, in-depth descriptions of the different scenarios, 4 different scenarios. The Tuna Atlas, Anton Ellenbrook and Julien Bard will present the Tuna Atlas. Then Aureliano Gentile will present the Vulnerable Marine Ecosystems database and the iMarine workflow for this database. Yann Laurent will present then Chimera, which is the name of the Western Indian Ocean Fisheries Regional Portal. And finally, Edward Vandenberg and Fabio Fiorellato will present Bionym and ecological modeling. And then we will have a kind of open session where some testimonies will be articulated with some discussions. So this is all about the user community data needs and how they are fulfilled with the iMarine solutions. And I start with this overview, which I organize in 2 parts. A very short first part, which is how did we organize ourselves in order to serve a policy framework facing big challenges such as the ecosystem approach. And in the second part, I will go through a brief overview of iMarine solutions and how we think that such a data infrastructure enable powers and synergies and efficiencies among different actors of the global community. As Donatella explained, this initiative was born from an ICT driver force, and this has been progressively conveyed into the hands of a user community, which we have constituted through the iMarine board, which provides a user community governance framework. And you can see that in order to address the challenge of the ecosystem approach and how to support that challenge, we brought together influential actors on the global scene and European scene across different domains: the fisheries domain, the biodiversity domain, and the marine environmental domain. So the representative of these institutions sits in the iMarine board, the governance body, to convey community requirements, which become the driver to the technology developments. And in order to create some stimulus, we have organized these efforts around 3 ecosystem approach policy challenges. We have called them business cases. The first one was the support to the implementation of EU common fishery policy. The second one was support to FAO's Deep Seas Fisheries Program. And the third one, support to regional, tropical, large marine ecosystem, pelagic ecosystem approach to fisheries community. So, and I have to say, I am the chair of the iMarine board as well. So for the last 3 years, we have been organizing these discussions, and I would like here to summarize in 1 slide what are the main data needs in the ecosystem approach policy framework, which iMarine, through its activities, has been striving to answer to. The first is, if you want to monitor the health and trends of the ecosystems, you need to have species niche modeling capacities. If you want to assess resources, manage fishing quotas, assess fishing impacts, you have to go towards more and more fine-grained catch and effort and other biological data capacities. If you increasingly fishery management has a need to have special management rules to preserve sensitive or fragile habitats, and here you need mapping capacities. This is the case for VMEs, vulnerable marine ecosystems, or EPSAs. And finally, we also acknowledge a very strong need for comprehensive knowledge bases to, in general, provide policy, well, a broad dashboard of policy indicators to monitor, for example, state of large marine ecosystems. So what were the solutions which iMarine provided? Bringing together knowledge, data, expertise from a broad range of actors brought together in this iMarine board. And I want to say that I put this term, synergies and efficiencies, because when you start to bring together these expertise from different communities, you understand that there are very complementary capacities which you can bring together and that create a lot of value added. And we try to explain that. Well, I will go pretty quickly. And again, yes, we need species predictive modeling to monitoring the ecosystem health and trends. The Aquamaps capacity is part of the infrastructure, and we'll get a testimony from Nicolas Bailly later on. To maintain ecosystem health, you require the identification of sensitive or fragile habitats, and the same actors have developed biodiversity models where you can jointly assess the occurrence of a set of taxa. And furthermore, the better you can define the correlation between species occurrence, for example, and physical or environmental variables in which they are identified, the more your species ecological niche modeling are going to be accurate. And so by bringing together biodiversity data and environmental data sources, indeed you are able to improve your species modeling capacities. A short slide on what is available. You have your species occurrence data, and by bringing into the data processes environmental variables and physical variables, you can again associate for each occurrence the most appropriate proxy data according to the rules that you define, the time range, the depth range, and in other words, you enrich your occurrence data with additional variables, and you can then convey that to statistical algorithms that will, again, for example, make you capable of defining biodiversity or species habitats. Mapping of sensitive habitats is required for applying special management measures. This is a snapshot of the vulnerable marine ecosystem database where the global community, through the regional fishery management organizations involved in the deep seas, try to identify these vulnerable areas and map them for protection of these habitats. On pelagic species, such as what you have in tuna fisheries, the mapping of sensitive habitats is aimed at reducing ecosystem impacts, for example, on bycatch species such as sharks, birds, seabirds, turtles, dolphins. And you have sightings or observation on board of these vessels that can be collated. And although this is a let's say, efforts stemming from the fishery community, this occurrence of bycatch species can indeed benefit from the approaches that the biodiversity or ecologist scientists have developed and result in the type of maps that I was presenting before. So here also I highlight the potential for synergies. I was saying that fisheries management and policy making requires assessing, for example, assessing IC's resources versus resources inside EEZs. This was a request from the UN General Assembly to facilitate policy making at global level. Also, for example, in order to set fish quota allocations, I know, for example, that the Indian Tuna Commission was looking at historical time series to try to understand how much of tuna species are part of EEZs of coastal states. So when you have in your hands relatively coarse fishery statistics of capture data, as you can see with the example here given with the green cycle, and if you have in your hands also species distribution maps, which is the case of the gridded red shaded colors for Atlantic herring here, you can, through reallocation algorithms, define some models to reallocate catch statistics by EEZ. So you get to a finer grained, or at least it's a different spatial resolution. And you can start to inform policy making. Talking about finer grain catch and effort data, in the field of fishery control and surveillance, but also adaptive fishery management, we are now, the global community is now stepping into the quota uptake monitoring or fishing impact assessment. And for that you need to be able to access to near real-time management of high-resolution fisheries operational data. And this is the example of VMS, Vessel Monitoring System, data sources, through which are used in monitoring, control, and surveillance, and through which you can reproduce and monitor the tracks of vessels and where they are fishing. But these VMS systems were initially set up for control and surveillance purpose, but are of high value to science in order to assess fishing impacts, for example. And having capacities to easily provide access of MCS data to science is one of the goals we are pursuing. And we are working, for example, with NIAF to develop this capacity today. And that has to work with a big concern, which is taking care of policies for confidentiality and security requirements. But you can see here that in that example, science people have access, in fact, to some level of aggregated data and processed data. They have not access to the raw data of VMS. Well, if you want to have timely, high-resolution and accurate information on catch and effort and additional biological data collected on board of fishing vessels, we have to promote simplified, efficient, and quality workflow across domains. And this is where we have to adopt common formats, common metadata formats. We have to be able to support harmonization. We have to be able to support validation rules so that the data is of a higher quality. These are two examples for which we had a lot of discussions and we made substantial progress. The example of e-log books on VMS data used in monitoring, control, and surveillance that flow from fishing vessels to flag states. The example of scientific data collected by observers on board that flow also to flag state, but research institute in this case. And the increasing need to develop regional databases in support to stock assessment or in support to fishery management plans, and how to enable an easy channeling of data sources would be to promote the emergence of regional or even better global standards, and the European community is working on that through different formats called either Flux or Fish Frame. But there is an understanding that there is a lot of commonalities between these data needs, and that there might be we might go towards the merging of these efforts. And what the board discussed were how to utilize the content of a data infrastructure like iMarine, where you have many available data sources, to improve the quality of each individual data provider, and also the harmonization support, which can, again, be provided either to the information systems of each flag state, but also could work at the level of the integrated regional database. And finally, once you have gone through this cleaning of data, harmonization of data, standardization of data, you can use with very standard formats that are promoted by the international community, which I have listed here. You can reuse much more efficiently through metadata standards all the data sources that went through this workflow, and you can run an analytical process which have been set up to work on these standards. Another, I would like to mention another type of synergy through a case study. In fisheries monitoring, in the ecosystem approach, attention is increasingly brought to a much broader range of species caught as bycatch or acting as indicator of fragile ecosystem habitats. That is not only the commercial species. And so that's why many species identification guides are being developed at regional or national level. But indeed, local effort would benefit from collated knowledge. One of the issues that we recurrently observed is that many names are reported with variations, spelling mistakes or different ways of spelling out scientific names. And the biological or ecological community had developed many approaches for taxonomy matching and mapping. By the way, by putting these expertise together with other needs that emerge through, for example, also the FAO fishery global record of vessels, where you have also many variations of names among fishing vessels. Other similar approaches had grown there, and by putting these efforts together, I think we have enhanced the capacity of taxonomy matching and vessel name matching. And other efforts, such as developed by FAO on the fisheries linked open data, which is organizing an ontology of terms, where all these the mappings among terms can be organized in a comprehensive knowledge base, result in capacities where you bring the knowledge of many actors together in a big knowledge base, and you can, for example, disseminate applications such as Applyfish. I believe a number of you have been made aware of this mobile application, where different sources of information were brought together, articulated around the species identification. And you can find species by many different ways, multilingual spellings, scientific names and other means, which were this breadth of capacities was not existing in any of the data sources. Likewise, by utilizing the same comprehensive knowledge-based capacities, Yann Laurent later on will explain how these capacities were used to connect different systems which are independent, but which the data content are brought together in a consistent way through a single data portal. So, in summary, what are the elements of synergies here, which I try to highlight, is that various business cases that the partners brought to the iMarine board, they complement each other. And you end up by building comprehensive toolkit, which, when you connect them together, enable to reconstitute an entire workflow from raw data collection to digested policy indicators. And the data produced by actor A become input to the processes required by actor B. And they are accessed in the same environment. Also, the tools that the different community partners have developed or have expertise for are brought together in the same context and can be reused across communities having similar needs. And they can be further enriched. The data availability among disciplines enhance the quality of the data owned by each actor. And also, we believe that by taking care of confidentiality requirements through different levels of access in the virtual research environment, we can be actors in facilitating the connection between MCS, monitoring, control, and surveillance data, and their use by scientists. And what I can see as well is that once you are in this kind of mindset, if you own a system, you will tend to start thinking that you should concentrate your efforts on what you can do well and alone, and you would delegate more to what can be done better by the community. And this is a way I can see personally where the business models are evolving. Delegating more to platform as services, service, and on concentrating on what is your core of your mandate in your own system. My last slide is about the ingredient of success here. A powerful technology, community governance is absolutely key to provide directions and to make sure that the stakeholders are in control of what they will get and how they invest their efforts. Something we have not yet mentioned up to now, but it is absolutely key, are data access and sharing policies. And we have progressed during these 2.5 years a data access and sharing policy document, which has been even reviewed now by our legal unit in FAO, and which is really major, I think, for near final draft status, which will become, at least at the end of this project, a reference document for sharing data in the iMarine platform. And finally, and this is what we will talk about this afternoon, we have to develop this business model for exploiting the data infrastructure with this proposal of a public-centered partnership business model. Thank you for your attention.